What are your first memories of going to church? When I went to church as a child, it seemed that all that mattered was church attendance. Even as a teenager and the early years of marriage, the church we attended put emphasis on attendance and tithing. I'm so glad that I have seen a big change in the years since then. I've traveled to third world countries. That gave me an entirely different worldview. Have you ever read something that just hits you right between the eyes? Maybe it's a passage from the Bible, a book, or maybe even a sermon. I recently pulled off a book from my shelf and decided to reread it again. The title is Dirty God. I didn't want to use that as the title for this video because you may have thought it was degrading God. Actually, the book is about how God sent his son to the world, not to reign from palaces, but to get into the trenches. Therefore, the title for the book, and it's all about grace. Philippians chapter 2, verse 6 says it this way, speaking of Jesus, who, being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. You probably know many stories from the Bible where Jesus got his hands dirty helping people. Even though his disciples traveled with him for 3 years and observed how Jesus treated people, they still didn't get it. I'd like to go to a passage from the book that really got to me. Up until a certain point, Jesus' disciples actually thought that they were going to follow Jesus on his white horse right into Jerusalem as he established his kingdom and made the world his servant. But Jesus wasn't interested in having the world serve him. He came to serve the world. His disciples' dreams of grandeur would soon collide with the reality that their path to stardom was more like a pending collision with the rich and powerful of Rome and Jerusalem. Hopefully the church you attend puts emphasis on more than just attending church and gaining knowledge of the Bible. Not that those are wrong, but they just aren't the whole package. Again from the book, God doesn't save us so that we can soak in religion, but so that we can get out and spread his love to the masses. And also, God expects us to get our own hands dirty, just like he got his own dirty. Find a way you can help so locally around the world. If you can't physically give of yourself, find an organization that you can support financially. Matthew 10:8 has Jesus telling his disciples as he sends out the 12, freely you have received, freely give. Grace is generous, but it isn't free. It will always cost you something when you decide to give, whether or not you receive anything in return. Usually, when you have received the gift of salvation, you want to share with anyone you meet. As you get further on your journey, you may lose some of that enthusiasm. Take some time and watch my video called Ornamental Grasses and the Christian Walk, if, that is, you have not already watched it. This is why we continually need to be spurred on toward love and good deeds, as described in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25. In the past, education was worried about a student's self-esteem, so they kept coming up with ways to make them feel better about themselves, when really the best way to build up a student's self-esteem was to have them give of themselves. Thankfully, I taught with a teacher who was constantly coming up with ways that students could serve. I actually think she was ahead of her time in public education. I know my grandchildren, in order to be part of the Honor Society, had to go along with good grades, put in time in an organization that helped with the community. So, if we look at the letter written by James, who was the half-brother of Jesus, in chapter 2, verse 17, from the New International Version, says, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. And the verse from the New American Standard says, for just as the body without the spirit is dead, so also faith without works is dead. If you can't give physically, then find another way to give, possibly by praying or giving financially. But start giving. If Jesus is your Lord as well as your Savior, then become a servant in some way because he set the example. So, it's time to get dirty.